The Volkswagen Beetle generations, one the vintage one, here the new Beetle and the current Beetle. We will compare them. We are also guests here at the Beetle Sunshine Tour. A lot of different iconic Beetle vehicles here today. A really good feature to enjoy for you in Full HD, full screen and full length. And Autogefuehl, your #1 resource for in-depth car reviews and your #1 community to discuss cars with me, with Thomas. We take a look at all of the generations, exterior, interior, and we will drive them, have a lot of fun with you together. Let's go! So the very first prototype goes back 80 years ago, from 1937, by Ferdinand Porsche himself. However, the real success story began after the war then. It's 1946 where this vehicle was built. Later on, as the production was cancelled in Germany, it was still being produced in Mexico, and this is one of those from 1984. The basic form and, all the deals, not so much has changed. There were the very early models where we had the windshield in the rear split, for example, but the basic form has remained ever since until 2003. That one here has been produced in Mexico and parallel also in Brazil. Really astonishing that the vehicle has been built for such a long time. Of course, one of the reasons is the iconic design. So let's take a look at the side profile with the iconic shape from the very front beginning. And yes, it looks like a Porsche because it basically is a Porsche. It was built by Volkswagen. Porsche came later. Then the windscreen here, pretty upright with those all tiny little wipers, really sweet. Then with the iconic back on the top, this one here is a private vehicle, and therefore you will also have some more luggage on the top. And this was actually also the way, for example, a lot of people from Germany drove to Italy, you know, in the 50s, 60s and so on, making their first holidays again and then putting everything here on the roof because there was not so much luggage space on the inside. We'll soon take a look at that. What do you think about the original vintage Beetle? Do you like it? Put it in the comments. And what about the luggage space? You open it here right in the front. There's a spare tire, and then you can stuff everything like in this height. So there, well, a classic suitcase would fit in there here in a standard size here like this. But of course you have to work with that, and that's the reason why I could also put something on the top. And now to the rear. A lot of horning still in the background from the parade. People are really enjoying this day. Classic Volkswagen badge. You can also get it for the newer ones. I will talk about that one later. And this iconic shape again to the rear, so dramatically flowing towards the end, and we still see that shape in today's Porsche vehicles. And the engine is here in the rear, and the reason was that it was fairly easily accessible, so you could repair everything on your own if you know something about it. And this one here, 34 horsepower. That's the reason why, you know, on those holiday trips when they went up the Alps, sometimes the whole family had to get out of the vehicle. One was driving, the other one were pushing the vehicle up the hill. So a lot of great memories a lot of families in Germany have with this very Käfer. In the interior, door closing sound. So, and here, slim doors, wooden steering wheel. Pretty simple. Looks sporty, the steering wheel, doesn't it? It's, by the way, also special paint on the exterior, special edition. And here you can see how simple vehicles were actually in those days, and even amazingly that in the same way it was built for centuries and centuries even further, and it was still bought also in Mexico and Brazil. Well, when I sit here, it's not too uncomfortably. There's plenty of headroom still for tall drivers left. The seats, of course, are very soft, so today's seats are way firmer and they offer you a little bit more room also on the seats. But actually in the front, you're pretty much okay with tall passengers. The only thing is, you know, with the legs. So, you know, there's a problem with the steering wheel. So this would be the only problem if you have long legs. You somehow have to squeeze your legs behind the steering wheel, or maybe you can even steer them better with your legs. And this is the interior overview. With the radio you can still turn really to, you know, change the frequency. This is the basic glove box, also Käferfach called, like the Beetle case. Again, the steering wheel, I think it's really neat with the Wolfsburg logo, the logo of the city of Wolfsburg in the middle one, analog display, and of course all hand shifting. Nothing else was available. Well, later on at this time, of course, but they still built it in this, you know, pretty standard way. And look how much space the co-driver has actually for the legs. So this is actually the most spacious part in the whole interior, funnily. Here the Wolfsburg logo, and then the instruments, classic round shape, and well, this 160 you probably will never ever reach. And this is also an interesting detail, is how you can actually shift if you do not know where. And it looks a little bit messy actually, but it makes sense in a way. And so if you don't remember, you can see it here. And what about the rear here? So, can I get in there? That's a good question. So now try to close the door, that not smashed by the wind somewhere. Well, yeah. But yes, also 4 adults went from Germany to Italy, you know, for long road trips. And headroom-wise, it's not the most, you know, the biggest problem. But of course, knee room-wise, when someone in the front would be a little bit smaller, that would be okay. But of course, this one here, you know, is the biggest advantage if you compare the current models. There's really more space in the rear. It was 1998 where the new Beetle came on the market, this new generation of the iconic vehicle. And this one is one from 1998, so one of the very first vehicles, and this is a unique piece. This one is only existing one time on this world. It is called Safari Tiger, but I'm not sure. It's more a leopard, isn't it? However, it's truly a very unique piece, and everyone here on the festival day is taking a photo of this very vehicle. Of course, we're going more in depth of it. And you already see it's not too different from the all-new model, well, the one that was introduced in 2011, at least from the front. More differences in side profile in the rear. We'll take a look at it. 4.08 is the length of this new Beetle, and this is 20 centimeters shorter than the next generation we are soon going in depth on. So this was actually closer in length to the original Käfer or Beetle. And what do you see? Well, 16-inch alloys, and of course this very iconic paint here again with those eyes. I mean, what do you think about it? I want to hear your comments on that one. And what you can see here is that this new Beetle generation really has this very, very round shape. So the front almost looks identical to the rear. And this has been changed a little bit to the next following generation then, so I will take a look at that very soon. Strong shoulders right there. You still see the iconic design originally derived from the sketches of Ferdinand Porsche. Definitely a very iconic car, and it definitely has this more round shape, this friendlier shape, whereas the following generation has some more dynamic. We will soon see that again. And of course, I want to hear you in the comments if you prefer this one here, the very vintage model, or the newest one. And look at this rear. It could be, just, think about a modern electric vehicle, could be a front of a modern electric vehicle, couldn't it? So, I mean, look at it. It's really amazing that you would build such a thing as a rear of a car. And the typical round taillights, those ones will be changed then later on for the new generation. This one still comes very close to the original one, doesn't it? And therefore, especially this generation also has a lot of fans, and you might know there are still a lot of vintage cars out there, but this vehicle here in this generation also has so many fans that a lot of the people attending the festival here today actually own this very generation. What about the trunk? You open it with the key here, with this wide hatch, and of course you do lose so much luggage space, and it's not really a versatile car. However, you can fit some, trolleys in there or backpacks, and even the flipping of the rear bench is quite handy with the central knob here, and then you just pull it forward, and it would go further if we put the front seats now a little bit more in the front. So overall, you can put something in this car, and I mean, the thing is, the main aspect is not that it really would be a versatile or practical car, it's just that it's so iconic and therefore people love it. So this is the key, classic Volkswagen key, and you can just use it normally, but there is also here an electric one available at that time already, and that was actually quite fancy for 1998. So let's get inside. It's so nice. Look at those very upright doors. Then on the inside, a lot of hard plastic is being used. Very slim. And more interesting is, look at this dashboard. And it is actually quite simplistic, isn't it? So if you look at newer cars today, sometimes you try to go back to a simplistic overview of the cockpit. Then again, those round shapes, for example, on top of the instruments. And let's get inside. We can adjust the seat manual here. The funny thing is that the smell has, a typical, well, it was really, has a typical smell from the Volkswagen cars at that time. It's not too unpleasant. I'm not sure if it's one particular plastic material, but, we remember in the family we had from same age a Volkswagen Lupo, and it was exactly the same smell in the vehicle. So it's funny because the steering wheel here is very slim. You can also adjust it. right there, even towards you. And what do you realize immediately? If you look to the front, it's a very wide dashboard, and you do somehow get a vintage car feeling, although it is, a rather modern car still. So in the cockpit overview, you can see what I meant. It's like I can't really reach through the windscreen. So wide everything in here. You can almost serve a buffet right in front of the dashboard. Again, rather simplistic in design. Interesting here to have this panic handle for the co-driver. The radio system, pretty simple. Not much you can do there besides of listening to the radio. All climate controls, really manual. You feel that you control them in the manual way. And of course, very important, the vase for, small sunflower, for example. You put it right there and you have it all in your sight. Around instruments, you can see the speedometer, also again in a vintage style. It also has something. So a lot of different details, elements, they have really something special. Well, the cup holders don't help too much because you can put higher bottles in there. Then a 5-speed manual with, pretty smooth shifting actually, and a manual handbrake. So again, not much to see here, but the simplistic design actually calms you down. So what about the rear? I mean, by all of the things you can say nice about the car, it's of course also a plastic landscape everywhere. Good old 90s, Then, what's very interesting, you can put this bench upright, right, like this, and then when you remember as we flipped it from the rear, when you remove the head restraints, then you can have a fold flat of the rear bench and have even more versatility in the trunk. So interesting idea. So let's see if I can sit here when someone is in the front. Well, not exactly with my knees, also not exactly with my head. I'm 1m86 or 6'1", if you haven't subscribed to Autogefuehl yet. Of course, in the front, the headroom is really vast. I could sit here at least for a short while, so 4 adults could endure a smaller trip, maybe not a longer one. And which engine do we have here? Really strange. A 1.9 liter TDI with 90 horsepower. So when's the last time you have seen a diesel with 1.9 liter displacement where you got 90 horsepower from? Well, we will find out when we drive this vehicle. And now to the current model, built from 2011 in this second generation. It's not only called New Beetle now, it's just called Beetle. That was the generation change. Still built in Mexico, and the biggest difference is that this one here is way more durable than the first New Beetle generation. The first New Beetle generation had a lot of quality issues. This one here, they have improved now. It's only sold as a convertible now in Germany because sales worldwide aren't that great for this very vehicle. Maybe it's still, just too much of a niche market, but of course they still want to keep building it because it's one of their most iconic vehicles. In the front it doesn't really, have much difference to the first generation of the New Beetle. Still the very round shape here, not too much has changed if you would look at it really in the detail. Of course, you have a little bit more angular features, for example, especially in the lower bumper. A very expressive red color here also, and you might also know our Beetle Dune review. Check out this one if you haven't done so far. I will link it in the video description. And we also have some more interesting features on this very vehicle. 4.29 m or 14'1" is the total length of this generation here. 20 centimeters longer than the previous generation. Rims from 16 to 18 inch, those ones here the 17 inch in this special retro style, which reminds us of the very vintage Beetle, also in the fitting color combination. Then chrome contrast side mirror caps, that's also a very interesting design feature. 3/4 of the Beetle in Germany were anyway sold as a convertible. That's also behind the decision only to sell the convertible now in Germany. There are other markets where the coupe is still available. In this most recent generation, even in the convertible, you see that the very, very round shape has been lost. It's a little bit flat, especially in the rear area, and has gone some more angular shapes. For example, this design play right there, light and shadow, you can see it very well. But still those strong shoulders here. Also the fuel cap is at the very same position right there. And I think with this current generation, they widened a little bit more of the the customer group, so it would appeal to more people, would look a little bit more sportier, a little bit more dynamic. You can open and close the roof up to a speed of 30 kilometers an hour. And well, it's actually quite handy, but what's not handy, well, it remains in this place here, and you can actually put a presenning over that one, a cover, and this reduces the wind noises. However, it's not too easy, and I would like to hear you, when you have this very vehicle, do you put the cover on, or will you say, whatever? Have some practice with it. It's been a year since I've done it with the Beetle Dune. Let's see how fast I can manage it, just, as I learned it by heart. I'll put the microphone on the ground. No, I will not do a microphone drop now because I still want to keep my microphone. So I will lay it gently into the vehicle and then I'll try to put on the cover as fast as possible. Let's check the clock. Yes, well, I could manage maybe a little bit faster with some more practice, but I hope you had at least fun watching it. And now to the rear of the most current Beetle, with actually a quite prominent rear wing. Also you can see that the taillights are not round anymore, have a more sporty dynamic shade. For 50 euros extra, by the way, you can also have a separate badging saying Käfer, so German word, or Beetle or Volkswagen in a vintage style. Also nice element. It's not put right there, but maybe we can find some other vehicle here today where this one was installed. So what do you think? This one here, the most current run prices in Germany, between 20 and 40,000 euros when you have like the highest engine, highest spec and so on. But still, this one remains one of the very rare convertibles on the market which are not in the highest premium segment and cost so much money. So one of the very few cheap payable convertibles still left. So don't say that this trunk here is smaller than in the previous generation, because here of course we are comparing a coupe to a convertible. However, well, this is probably still the biggest drawback. This is a small hole. You can put the wind deflector in this cover in the top part. However, you can also flip the seats from the trunk, so you can load things through, and then you get an impression. When I put a bag in here, well, 2 trolleys could fit next to each other, at least. This is the standard car key. You can still use the manual one, but usually you just use the electric function. Then the interior, and yeah, we can discuss it a very long time, and some would probably say eye cancer. Well, let's say it is fitting to the exterior color and is really dramatic. To me it would be a little bit too much, but the color concept, is at least stringent and consistent. So, yeah. Let's discuss this in the comments for sure. But I think it's nice that they have used all of the space they have available. In the Beetle Dune, I think it's a little bit more fitting to the yellow exterior, yellow interior. It doesn't look that dramatic than you would do it with this shiny red. Would you exactly pick it in that way? Then pick it up in the comments. We're looking forward to that. The seats here in the base model all fabric, and they're really wide, offer you a lot of room. Also available with inside cloth and outside leatherette, for example for the Beetle Dune, and in the R line you can also get microfiber or Alcantara, as we also call it. The seating position is very comfortable actually, so it's one of the very few comfortable convertibles left as well, even though it's a very small one. I can also close the roof again to show you what about the headroom when the roof is actually closed. Other than that, you can have the manual pump it up your control of the seats. Also the steering wheel can be adjusted, and it is a more comfortable seating position than in the previous generation, that's for sure. And I really have to say, it's of all the 3 generations, I mean it should be, but it's definitely the most comfy one. Then let's close the roof again. Let's see. Oh, no, we shouldn't do that. Yeah, and good that the car realized that. So maybe I would have broken something now, but there's an electric mechanism that tells me, you have still mounted the cover. And that's again, live on tape Autogefuehl. Yeah, Katrina, cameraman today, she's laughing out loud now at the moment. And the good thing is, that car reminds you of that. And again, another indicator that it's really not that handy to have the cover mounted on there. So here we go. Still a lot of headroom left, so that's actually not a problem. Well, in the rear it will be a problem, but to show you that, I have to open the roof again, because at the moment I have the wind deflector mounted, and that one is really important. Well, the roof cover, it makes a little bit difference to have less wind noises. However, even more important is it really that you have this deflector mounted. If you put it up, it really reduces the wind noise, and you can easily go, yesterday I was driving 120 kilometers an hour open top on the motorway. So that was actually no problem. So it's not only a summertime convertible, you can use it all season long. So what about the wind deflector? Let's put it down, and then you can remove it like this. So removing it is actually quite simple. And then you can store it in the trunk. Putting it in again, it's handier to do it with 2 people. You have to do it like this. And then go to both sides, that the outer parts here from rubber fit into those tiny holes on each side. So you can do it alone, but with 2 people it's easier. However, at the moment I also want to test the rear seats, so let's leave it out for a second. So if I would leave the front seat as I would be driving, it's, you can slide it forward, and of course I can get in easy now when the roof is down. But if you slide it backward, well, for my knees, it's not really more space than we had, for example, in the previous generation. Also headroom-wise, when the roof is closed, I would sit like this. You can endure it as, as a tall person for quite a little while, but not really for a longer trip. At least, well, when the driver is a little bit smaller, it would be less of a problem. Yeah, it is a little bit more comfy, a little bit wider than in the previous generation, but you do not really feel that the car would be much longer. And here the cockpit overview was missing. Here again in full glory, this glossy red design. It's really too much. But on the other hand, it's unique and somehow funny for sure. Hard plastic used on the top of the dashboard. You have to remind, this one is not a high price car. And I think it's very good that you still have an affordable convertible. The steering wheel is very slim, has therefore a kind of vintage look and also vintage feel to it. And I think this is what makes the character of this vehicle. It's modern on the one hand, but vintage still, with those quotations from the past. Very interesting. The climate unit, normal Volkswagen style, easily accessible, 5-speed manual gearbox we have right there. And in the lower part also, for example, putting your mobile phone USB supply, or you can also put your mobile phone here, just with the leatherette cover in white here from Katrina. Put it just under the armrest here. So you have some spaces, and the most important one is of course the so-called Käferfach, the Beetle, Beetle storage space. And that one is the one also inspired by the vintage one right there, just above the normal glove box. Instruments, 3 round gauges fitting to the overall style of the vehicle. Left RPM, central speed, and the right, a big how much fuel there is left. Infotainment unit, the biggest one that is available here with the proximity sensor. Then you have the buttons here. It is small somewhat, but it does the job. For example, you can zoom in and out. Like with a smartphone, you see there's good responsive times, pretty fast. Also, you can do that here with this zoom knob. That is possible too. The phone can be connected via Bluetooth like this. However, it's also possible to use the app Connect and then put it in the cable and use the smartphone mirroring functions. So let's take a look under the hood. This one here, a TDI with 110 horsepower. It's also available with 150 horsepower. It's a 2-liter TDI. This one here, very fuel saving. 4.7 liters I could score on a test ride. If you compare the 2-liter TSI, the top petrol engine we had in the Beetle Dune with 220 horsepower, that one was about 8 liters. However, I still think that a petrol engine is enough for this small and very light vehicle. And besides the 2-liter TSI with 220 horsepower, you also have 1.4-liter TSI with 150 horsepower, or the smallest one, 1.2 TSI with 105 horsepower. And the bigger ones you can also get with the DSG with the dual clutch transmission. And we now got another vintage Beetle for you. It's a special convertible called 1302, a special model. It's from the 1970s, already with a 50 horsepower engine. And we will drive exactly this one. This one here is the official one from Volkswagen Classic. I didn't want to ask the private customer or the private fan that I can also drive the vehicle, so I'll rather take this one. It's also convertible. I will drive it with open and with closed top. I can tell you, it will be a hell of a ride. And you might wonder how to open the thing. Well, it's relatively easy. All manual work. You have to release it here in the top part. And then you can pull the hinge down. And here in the front, you have to pull a little bit down again. And then it's actually free to move when you have to do it on both sides. And then you can just pull it over like this. Doing it very gently. Well, in the Mazda MX-5 it's easier, isn't it? There's also a presenting top cover possible to put on it, but you know, so much work again. And one more look at the interior, pretty similar to the one we've seen before, but different color here, for example, and also with the repeating orange right there. Also with the wooden gear stick here, not with a wooden steering wheel whatsoever, but again, very slim. So we'll start with the vintage model, and it's really some crazy stuff. The seating position is crazy enough, and of course, the first thing you have to be able to handle is actually, you know, shifting and pulling the clutch and everything. And this is so much easy in nowadays cars. For example, here you really have to, you know, control the throttle and the clutch and you really get it right. Then the first gear, sometimes you first have to search it, like where is it exactly? Now I'm in second gear. 50 horsepower engine in here. Special model, and the seating position is for sure from all of those generations the less comfortable ones. So I have really a lot of respect for all those people that really ran long road trips with it. The steering wheel is all manual work. Funny thing is, it is relatively direct. So you see the commands are directly transported to the road. It's really funny to drive. This, by the way, sometimes is you know, the noise here, something from the key, for example. And of course, a lot of rattling elements in here. This one of the very few early models that still exist that you can drive with the open top. Therefore, it's also very rare. One of the situations, for example, like those, you know, when you have to brake, this is actually the most dangerous one with those old cars, because yeah, they have less power, but the thing that is most surprising to you when you drive them, if you compare them to modern cars, is the braking power. And there's really hardly any braking power if you compare them with really modern cars. And I think this is also the biggest difference, and you have to be aware of that when you drive the car. Here you have to really put a lot of power to the steering wheel, especially when you're driving straight. Let's see what's rattling there. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's also from the roof. So when you're driving straight, you don't need to have so much power. But as soon as you go in corners and stuff, then you really feel that you have to apply even more pressure to the steering wheel, that you have to work with it. So this is to me then, you know, one of the biggest differences for sure. Of course, people are also, you know, congratulating you and looking at, you know, great stuff and really nice vehicle and so on. So this is always something very special when driving in such a vehicle here, for sure. A lot of sunshine coming in as well. So to me, of course, really hard with the seating position. I think when you're a little bit smaller, you would have had less problems with it. I feel really a little bit cramped in this seat here. It's funny that the steering wheel is so slim. Then we can also see how, you know, where was this all inspired from, you know, with the steering wheel. This was really inspired from this very steering wheel, that we have it so slim. And I think the most amazing thing to me is really that it's relatively easy to handle as for the steering. And it's also, you know, surely fun to drive. Accelerating wise, well, there's not so much happening, you know. Like you push the throttle and, well, really hardly anything happens. So that's for sure of anything. But same with the brakes. I mean, there's no electronic brake help or something like that. So you really have to hammer them all the way by yourself. And if you just step away from a modern car into such a vehicle, you really have to be aware of that you know, that you don't fail the next braking maneuver, for example. You know, when I'm accelerating, feel that there are also, you know, force on the tires, then it really makes a difference with the steering wheel. Such an interesting sound, right? Especially, you know, with the open top. There's not too much wind coming inside. Maybe it's also because of the very, very steep window right there. That this is maybe not happening. So it's also an interesting finding. But for sure, it's mainly a car where you like to drive at slower speeds, mainly. And I mean, soon we are getting to some more speed. Let's see how that one plays out then. And then we can also just close the roof again and see how that one works out for this case. my foot don't really fit, you know, the pedals. So when I'm pushing the clutch, for example, my foot is bending against you know, the lower cover, everything there. So it's also funny with those little details there. Come on, come on, come on! Third gear now. But to cruise, it's enough horsepower, but you don't get so much, you know, so much boost anyway. So now we're driving almost 70 kilometers an hour. We can even go to a fourth gear, and that's it. And yeah, now it gets really fresh in here. So a lot of fresh air. This is also a big difference to the modern convertible, to the modern versions. You get way more fresh air in this one here, for sure. Well, let's turn up right here again. So what do you think, guys? Enjoying those vintage rides? You told me you want to see more vintage cars, just, you know, for automotive enjoyment. Surely always worth a while to just open the window to the past and then see what do we have today. And surely from the looks, there's always something special, something unique. But the biggest difference is always in driving to me, because it's always like I always love to look at very old vehicles, but then when you drive them, you get a feeling for that, why so much has changed actually, because it's also for the good actually. So it's totally clear that this in 1 year is a way less safe car than any of those we see today here. For example, if something would be popping up, suddenly right here, even if I react very fast, maybe I would even that, see here when I stop right here, just a second later, this is taking the stuff with the gears. You have to find the gears. So just when I was talking about the situation, you cannot react suddenly in those vehicles. Oh, there's an old 2CV. And so you have to plan a little bit more ahead to be, to be ready to do something like that at any time. Shifting indicators like this. You can also smell this vehicle very well, even if you're sitting inside. So, what about a round with a closed top? Let me just find a parking spot, and then we can also close the roof for you, maybe. Let's see. Up the hill, come on, come on, come on. So, here we go. That took a little while, right? Start up again. Wow. Very interesting side mirrors too. Now of course it's, well, I'm not exactly sure if it's in this vehicle more silent when you have the roof down. It's also interesting, right? Isn't it? So there is no such thing as insulation from the roof cover. So yeah, again, I think I have somehow the feeling that the car would be more silent if you drive with open top. Really interesting. Now let's go in this turnabout here. Let's see how fast we. Let's see. Here, when you really are turning the car even more, then you have to work. There's a lot of force now at the steering wheel. So this is again the biggest difference, that you don't have this electronic support anywhere. You have to get used to it. Of course, again, this is what makes this car also so unique. The overview, by the way, is really bad. You cannot see that much. The only good thing is that in the front there's a relatively short car overhaul. So you basically can't hit anything that fast. But again, how the car is built, how it's designed, and that was of course also the main, the main purpose for this long history. Then later on, it's not really designed that it would be, having a good overview, and you have to be aware of that. It speaks also for the convertible, because then you do have a better overview. So let's see if we can also go faster just a little bit. The closed top version would of course be, a little bit calmer for sure. Now again, acceleration 30. Now I'm hammering the throttle 40, 50. Well, it's actually not too slow when you hammer it a little bit. Here in this region, by the way, the steering wheel is rather dead. I think you can't blame this old lady from the 70s. Fourth gear is even possible here now. And maybe you can also hear the difference on the camera with the closed roof now. And it's getting quite hot in here, so I really, really like the fresh breeze we got there earlier. So, I hope you liked our inside here. From the original Käfer, the Bug. It reminds me a little bit also of, also interesting driving feeling, the Willys Jeep, the original one, you know. That was even more manual. It was also an older car. But man, so much has changed in automotive history, and the next revolution is just upon us, you know, with all the connectivity, autonomous driving, and so on. And so it's always nice to take a look back and to see how have we changed so far. Now to our test ride in the new Beetle, 1.9 TDI with 90 horsepower. And what you immediately realize, if you compare it also to the current generation, this is here way more rattling. So the sound insulation is not at the level as the current model. You hear clearly that's a diesel, whereas where you drive the modern diesel, you do not really realize that it would be a diesel. Still, it is a very handy car, easy to control. You have a good overview actually, although the size is not really the best for an overview. But the front is ending right there where you see it. And that's of course, it really comes handy when you drive the vehicle inside the city. The steering is very light. And, well, it's not exactly a sporty driving feeling, you're wobbling a little bit around. I think the main thing is that you still have this rather slim steering wheel. Somehow it's a pretty unique form, for sure. And just, the structure design on the inside you see is somewhat joyful. And this is also being transported to the driving of the very vehicle. Again, I think the biggest difference to the modern generation here is really sound insulation and riding comfort. This one is really set on a very comfortable ride. It's rather soft from the suspension. But when you soon see me talking again in the new generation, you will maybe even realize it on camera that you can hear me better. For example, the diesel, you hear this typical diesel nailing. You wouldn't hear that on the very new generation. Actually, when you drive a diesel there, and you wouldn't tell someone before, and you don't take a look at the RPM meter, you couldn't really tell the difference between the diesel and the petrol engine. Power-wise, well, it's not too much to expect here from this very engine. I mean, if you put low displacements with high horsepower figures, that might also, not be the best idea for the durability of an engine. So this is actually not too bad to get a little horsepower from big displacement. However, if you think about, driving on a motorway or so, yeah, you don't have too much power. Obviously, everyone's leaving freeway for the Tiger or for the Leopard Beetle we're driving here today. It's really funny because so many people are taking pictures of it. Easy shifting, by the way, pretty smooth. And due to everything's being so straight here, you also feel that would be somehow transporting onto the road. It's a really strange feeling. See, a little bit of handling here. Steering wheel is not really direct, but not too bad either. Overall, you feel that this vehicle has some ages, so here and there you feel some rattling. It's not by any means a perfect vehicle, but if you then compare, talked about the Volkswagen Lupo earlier, similar small Volkswagen vehicles from this very time, there's not too big of a difference actually. Then there were, of course, those durability issues they had, especially with the new Beetle generation. They got better over the years, but definitely the second generation then was way better in this respect, because they had more experience and reworked some issues and stuff. Maybe if you're a customer of the first Beetle generation, tell us your feedback, then we can learn something from that. That's always interesting to hear. Of course, this is also rather a vehicle for low speeds, city driving, countryside and so on, not really suitable autobahn vehicles. You don't have so much power there, and also, the stiffness on the road would probably be a problem. It's possible, of course. Let's accelerate here a little bit more. That's 50. So I wasn't giving it 100%, so it's okay actually for the city. But then again, I wonder why they offered it with diesel anyway, because the car is very light. Petrol engines would surely be enough for this one. So now we're driving just a little bit faster. Let's see the handling. It's somewhat fun because it's still a small car, so the handling is quite good. I remember it riding this one here in Midtown Madness. You maybe know the video game where this vehicle was basically staring. So it was one of the main character vehicles. Now to 70, second gear. Here we go. And that's 70 with the acceleration. Some rattling from the right door coming now. So, those imperfections here, surely they are there, but most of the fans will just say, the vehicle is still so cool that I don't really care that much. What's also remarkable when driving, that you have so much space here in the front. This gives you somewhat like a traveling feeling, so you don't feel caged in, although it's a small vehicle. As you have so much air here in the front, I could also very well imagine maybe going on a longer road trip with that. To the vintage one, of course, a big difference, you cannot really compare it. This is already a modern car. To the new generation, besides sound insulation, the newer one has a little bit more agility, sportiness, suspension is even better, of course, more power, and feels way more refined. Here, for example, now when the road is a little bit uneven, the suspension gives it to you. However, this one is by no means, a vehicle where you would only drive it when you're a fan of oldtimer vintage cars. You can still go for it. It's still a normal car from modern perspective, and it's an easy vehicle. You can get used to it just in a minute, in a second. Everything is basically self-explanatory. And again, if you wanna join this fanship, which we've also seen on the festival, this is probably the most accessible, the most affordable way to do that here. And now our driving journey will end here with the current model. And we will start with closed top to demonstrate you that even though this one here is a convertible, you probably hear that on camera that the noise level is way lower than in the first new Beetle generation. So this one is, to me, one of the biggest differences for sure. So way more silent in here. Everything feels more refined. The steering is still very light and easy to control when parking, for example, but it has more dynamic. Also, the suspension is a little bit firmer without being less comfortable. So this one here is really sporty to drive. The most dynamic one, the most fun to ride for sure if you think in sporty dimensions. That is absolutely clear. Shifting again, really smooth. Oh, what a nice doggy. So this one here also, sadly, a small diesel engine. Well, but the good thing is it consumes really little fuel. But the funny thing here is that you hardly feel or hear that it is a diesel engine. So it's really well insulated, this engine, and so you wouldn't really immediately say, oh, that's a diesel. I think that's also speaking for the refinement of this very engine. So this one feels modern and refined, that you can really say, you know, you get this one if you don't want a vintage car to drive, you just want this vintage look. And I mean, this one, the most current Beetle still has. Even somewhat here in the interior. Of course, you can individualize it with your colors. You don't have to go for this very option. But it's for sure the calmest ride and also the most comfortable ones. Even in the first new Beetle generation, yeah, I mean, after an hour or so, the lower back area, I was saying, maybe that's not the most comfortable situation for my lower back. And here it's actually less of a problem, so I wouldn't mind driving maybe a longer road trip with this one. So to me, also from the seating wise, the most comfortable one. Also, it's really handy that we can open and close the roof up to a speed of 30 kilometers an hour. Now, of course, I'm really a convertible fan, so I always enjoy that. Now we're only allowed to drive 30 anyway, so let's just try it. So it's always funny in the moment where you open it, you get this wind boost then. It's really funny. And that is something really to enjoy. You can, by the way, with the handles on the inside of the door, you can control every 4 of those windows singularly. So that is actually no problem. Maybe we can also drive a little bit faster with the convertible, that you know how that one feels and how that one reacts. I think at one point I already said that yesterday I was driving 120 with open top on the motorway, and that was, what the? Did you see that on the camera? So I almost ran over a cyclist, like with heavy speed. Whoa. Watch out. Yeah, so 120 open top is no problem for this vehicle. It was actually quite okay. Faster, I wouldn't feel too comfortable. Here again, difference between this one and the previous generation. Here you have so much less rattling somewhere. Even if you drive faster, nothing is rattling like blah, 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 blah. In the first new Beetle generation, you had, instead of the passenger door, somewhere in the front of the dashboard, that sometimes you felt or heard something just flobbling around. That's not happening here. And well, that also goes alongside with the fact that this one here is also the more durable generation. So also again, when you want to have, as little hassle as possible with a vehicle with this outlook, then this one would also be the choice. I really like the Beetle Dune, also from the styling. I think because that, you don't have to be a chauvinist to say that this vehicle here from the form pleases a lot of women. It's also not bad at all, So I think the Beetle Dune is something. It's more unisex a little bit from the style, if you know what I mean. Also with this little bit off-road style. So I would really like that. So also as a not too expensive convertible. At the moment, by the way, 70 kilometers an hour, when I put up the wind deflector, well, that immediately decreases the wind turbulence in the interior. The big difference. So if it's a little bit colder and you don't want too much wind inside, put up the wind deflector and then that's it. with the presenting, the cover mounting. We had some fun with that today already. I mean, yeah, it's optional somehow. It is really unhandy if you come to a point where you say, I want to close the roof again. So what shall I do? Would I mount it every time? I really don't know. I did some testing like with 100 and with and without it, and yes, it is somewhat useful to have it mounted. Then again, come on, do you really always want to do that? And then it blocks you the flexibility to close the roof again. Now, for example, it's really windy here near the German coastal side and way up in the north. It's near Travemünde, or in Travemünde we are today. Very beautiful spot. There's a nice cruising speed here for sure, and you can also see, even at higher speeds, this vehicle here remains stable and really fun to drive. This is so much fun to drive, for sure. And the new Beetle, the first new Beetle generation, isn't as much sporty, dynamic fun to drive because the suspension is also a little bit softer, it lets the car tilt around and so on. But here is actually no problem. Lane change here again, really dynamic fun. There's no one behind us. What about the smallest diesel variant here, 110 horsepower? Let's drop a little bit in speed. If we do something like 75 kilometers an hour to 100, which, you know, overtaking on the motorway, something like that. Let's see how that goes out. 90, 100. Yeah. See, in the higher speed areas, it's not so much happening anymore then. However, it's rather a vehicle for the lower speed city driving and so on, and therefore it's fine. And on the motorway, you would just maybe roll or set here the cruise control. There's a normal cruise control, not adaptive, you can set. There's no adaptive cruise control, no ACC available for this vehicle, as it doesn't have the most modern technology on board. This is what's the same with the infotainment system. It's not with the latest standard, but then again, it's also not that high in the price. And recently there were also a lot of very interesting leasing offers. So it was at some point incredibly cheap to get the leasing rate for this vehicle. There were especially actions for that, so for the convertible. And so a lot of people got their new Beetle over this way then. And now to our conclusion for today with this special feature. I hope you really enjoyed it. What a vintage, funny ride with the original Käfer with the Beetle. The new Beetle, something in between for sure. And you can see until the current model, the basic DNA has been kept alive. And that's also the reason why the fans also appreciate the new model. So there are, you know, some other vehicles where only the old models are really appreciated. But here, as you could see on this festival, on the Beetle Sunshine Tour, also the current models are really loved by the fans. So iconic, it's a mix between a vintage car and a modern car in the usual variants. It's not really a so versatile car, and we've seen also in the convertible with the roof so many things that are not really that practical, but it's not really the point. The point is that this vehicle is all about fun. And that's also what makes this still so special. And what also remains, it's really still a relatively cheap vehicle, and so you can also have a good access to the car. That's another argument for sure. I want to hear your feedback on all of the three generations. Let's discuss this in comments, and I hope you enjoyed this. Again, another generations episode. We also have it, for example, of the Seat Leon and of the Volkswagen Golf. Also enjoying this one, and also check out the Beetle Dune full review. Thanks so much for watching, guys.